My name is Andy Forney with D.A. Davidson, and I've actually worked with the hospital personally since 2012. Worked on the last bond issue with the hospital on a refinancing. And one of my colleagues, Phil Lorenzen, actually has worked with the hospital on the bond issue back in 1978. And he still works in our office. We work closely together, so so this has kind of been a fun project to work on. And I can say that one thing that really I've taken to heart from the very beginning of this process that the hospital board has stressed to me is that when we run these numbers, everything that we've tried to do from the beginning was to be extremely conservative with the numbers. And I think that'll kind of be a tone that you'll see as we go through this. How do I? Thanks. So for the bond issue, we have voter approved. You know, Steve talked a little bit about the difference between the USDA financing and the bond issue. I think, and not to speak for the hospital board, but the idea to put it to the voters and make it the voters' decision. Ultimately, the voter approved general obligation bonds will get a little bit better interest rate, and you'll pay a little bit less interest over the life of the bonds. With these bonds, we're assuming an A+ investment grade for the county. You know, again, if we were to be aggressive, we could have assumed a AA-. We just saw a AA- in Washington County on a similar type bond issue. But for all of our numbers, we've been assuming an A+ rating. Again, that is an investment grade rating, but we're assuming an A+. These rates are fixed for 25 years over the life of the bond. The county does have the option to refinance after 5 years if rates were to go down. The other thing that I think it's important to stress is that we're using a steady valuation. So as we figured these numbers, we use 2018 valuation, and we use that static valuation for the whole life of the bonds, for the full 25 years. And Debbie did walk in and tell me the valuation went down by $80 million for the valuation this year. So as valuation fluctuates, it'll go down a little bit, it'll go up a little bit. But over the life of these bonds, if the levy's left the same, after 5 years, if valuation goes up, there'll be some extra money in that bond fund that you can potentially pay these bonds off early. The money that's levied for the purpose of paying these bonds can only be used for bond payments. So that money can't be used for anything else, can't be used for hospital operations or anything else for the county. It can only be used for bond payments. The total bond amount to be bonded is not to exceed $20,500,000. We're projecting an interest cost of 3.54%. Another thing that I'll let you know is that, you know, we started talking about this process, as Steve has pointed out, a long time ago. And interest rates have fluctuated, and that's going to be one of the main drivers of the total interest that we pay on this project. And I think from a timing standpoint, as some of these slides will show later, you know, some things have worked in our favor with interest rates over the last few months. And so we'll remain hopeful. Valuation has dropped a little bit, but some of the things that have happened with interest rates I think are going to help us. So the projected total annual debt service, $1,248,000. So the projected levy is 8.47 cents. We'll go to the next page here. How is that going to impact me? 8.47 cents. So according to the assessor, the average assessed value of a house in Chase County is $106,155. So the average homeowner in the county will see an increase of $7.49 a month on their taxes. Obviously, that is going to a dramatic change for somebody who has a bigger house. If you have a $250,000 house or assessed at a $250,000, you're looking at more like $17.64 a month, or an annual $221.70 on a $250,000. And for agricultural land, I wanted to break this out a little bit more. Another thing, when we were being really conservative on this irrigated, we use the high end. I use the 1A1 higher end of irrigated best soil cropland for this first category. And I know that the farmers and landowners out there, you'll know what category of land you have way better than I will. But I wanted to be conservative, and some people have pointed out that a quarter section of irrigated ground isn't actually 160 acres of irrigated ground because it's a circle. It's not a perfect square. So this isn't intended to be exactly what your quarter section of irrigated ground would go up. Again, it's very intended to be very, very conservative. And the board's asked me to do that, and so that's what we wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that when you look at these numbers, when your taxes come around, you know, I get to go home, but the board members, the hospital directors, Steve, everybody's going to be here, and so I want to make sure that the numbers that I'm showing, you know, everybody can live with, and that I don't disappoint. Because, like I said, my partner at D.A. Davidson worked on the bond issue in 1978, and I got to work on the one in 2012, and here I am today. And so I would like to have a long career and maybe work on another one before I retire. So again, everything I've done, I hope I've done conservatively. My interest rate projections have been fairly conservative. And then I've got a slide later that I'll show you. The second part of this, in talking with Simon Johnson, the hospital's auditors, there's some benefits to having this debt outstanding. And so these aren't my figures. The hospital's auditors have come up with an amount that the hospital can pay out of their own revenues that the taxpayers would not be on the hook for. However, they are, because it's a county-owned hospital, they do have the ability to access limited tax bonds, and also, we believe, sell investment-grade bonds. And I'm using a very conservative interest rate for both bond issues. So I'm assuming about the same interest rate. These would be likely bank qualified. And the nice thing about bank qualified bonds is that they get an extra little incentive. We would likely market these to local institutions. Because they're bank qualified, the holders get an extra, institutions, local banks would get an extra incentive to hold them, an extra tax incentive to hold them. So we're projecting around the same interest cost, but the hospital would be on the hook for about $333,000 a year in annual interest. And here's the thing that's kind of been encouraging for me. So when we started talking about this, and I know that, again, I know that valuations have gone down, but when we were looking at these numbers and we kind of got that number ballooned up to 29 million, and we started to get a little bit nervous about the total levy price, this is kind of where we were talking about it in the interest rates. And you can see what rates have done in the last 3 months. And so I don't know, I can't predict with my crystal ball what rates are going to do over the next month, but from a timing standpoint, if rates will hold, you know, if this is something that the community wants to do and wants to support, this makes, as far as the valuation going down, it costs the same amount of dollars. The dollars are coming from somewhere. They're coming from the same folks. So the interest rate is really what makes a big difference in how much total money it's going to cost over the life of the bond. So, you know, again, I can't predict what's going to happen with this number over the next month, but it sure feels like we're getting a little break there. So, and that's all I've got.